on this computer. All right, fantastic. All right, so Jeff, thank you for jumping on this interview today. I really appreciate it. So I'm going to be posting this on the Motion Sim Builders YouTube channel. You and I kind of go back quite a ways. You know, we met very, very early on, pre-COVID, which is funny because COVID's been going on now for 3 years. You know, I bought one of the very early DOF rigs, as we've talked about in the past. I was like the #1 customer, or the first customer in North America, you know, working with those guys over there with Igor and his crew. And they were awesome. And that's how you and I connected. And you know, you and I just talked about this right before the call, and you joined the group, and it was about 300 people, you know, on the DOF reality group. You know, and that's just exploded. I mean, we just talked about how that group has 8,500 plus people on it now. And then the Motion Sim Builders group has got, I think, about 3,000 people on it. You know, there's some cross same people in both groups, but it's been really special. I mean, it's been fun to watch it grow. I really credit guys like yourself and the other moderators that we have involved. You know, Shane's been hilarious with his crazy socks, but just a good group of guys. I mean, I can't wait to get Shane on this. He's going to be a lot of fun. He sent me socks for Christmas.
Yeah, if Shane doesn't join, I have the photo still. I'll post that up again so everyone can see it, and then get the therapy needed afterwards.
Absolutely. So take us through some of the history. Let's go back like 6-7 years ago. What gets you into sim racing? What makes you tick?
Yeah, great question. I've been thinking about that a long time. So I've been gaming all my life. So I mean, I can go back to when I was a teenager. I'm going to date myself back in the 80s. Here we go.
We're close. We're close in age. I was a teenager
exactly.
in the 80s.
And I remember playing on my father's 286 things like sims like Gato, which was a submarine simulator where you had like basically a 4-color monitor. I always remember the water was magenta, all the way to the very first Microsoft Flight Simulator. And so I've always was into video games, but specifically Sims kind of then. Wasn't quite racing back then. I was always kind of a flight kind of guy.
Yeah, I mean, I was always I didn't like first-person shooter. I didn't like Pac-Man and stuff. I was always like when you put me in like pole position, that was my game.
yeah. So it was just it's the technical aspect of it I always kind of loved. And I remember you know, as the computers got better and whatnot, and around the 90s or whatnot, I got into like the Jane's like series of video games, and specifically the AH-64 Longbow was a game that was dear to me. I also played things like the early versions. They called it NetMech, which was MechWarrior.
I remember MechWarrior. That's right.
Yeah, you would play DOS.
Yeah,
exactly.
You're dating me, Jeff. Thanks.
I know, exactly. It was playing it in DOS and having my CH products, rudder pedals, and throttled back then, playing through DOS, through Kali, which is what it was called.
For those younger people watching, back then, like you actually, your operating system sat within DOS. You'd have to run Windows Workgroup out of it. All your games ran from the command prompt, and so you have to load all your drivers manually. You had a stack of disks like this.
Oh yeah. A download of a meg would take like all day.
Hopefully you didn't get to you know, disk 36 of 96. Exactly. That was bad because that happened.
Exactly. Oh man.
I know, right?
Exactly. And then I always kind of played games there, and then I always remember, like, say, my first sim racing experience was with I was in a software company that was based out of Los Angeles, and there was a group of guys there that played I don't know what year version it was, but it was the F1, probably 1995 or something like that. And we played F1, and I always remember that experience, and we took it seriously and did full races for a half an hour. And I always remember just being covered in sweat and just loving it, the intensity of it. And then around 2000, I kind of switched into other kind of video games. Wasn't really big into Sims at that time for about, say, 10 years or so. Kind of drifted back and forth between a whole bunch of different games and whatnot. Fast forward to about 2019 or so. And I had gotten really busy in my career, working a lot, doing those different kind of things. Lost sight and focus, moved away from PC gaming, kind of was in consoles for a while just because of the ease of it.
I know consoles made it easy, but also could have made us lazy too, I feel.
Exactly. But the defining moment where I always tell my wife that was the where everything shifted was I ended up getting a PlayStation VR setup, and I was blown away by VR in general. But there was this one demo disc in the game for a game called Eve Valkyrie, and what that was, it's kind of a dead game now, but it was based off of the Eve. Yeah, and it was a space flight combat simulator. I will always remember that day of just putting on the headset and being in the cockpit of this space fighter jet and it taking off through this say catapult system and going out into space. And right then and there, it was the click. All my life, I've loved jet fighters. My father worked for Hughes Aircraft. He would bring me home. He was kind of one of those guys that would actually go to Miramar and teach the Top Gun guys about how to use the missile systems, the radar systems, and the AMRAAM and Phoenix missile
Jeff,
systems.
where are you located? I should have asked early on.
Yeah, I'm in Eastern Washington right now.
Okay.
So
Right.
yeah, Eastern
That's
Washington.
Right. I knew
grew
you
up
were in
in
Washington. I knew that.
Yeah,
so,
yeah. It's we call it Tumbleweed, Washington. It's a big desert out here.
Nice.
Not a lot to do, so it's like video games is what started it.
Yep.
But I grew up in LA, and so he would drive down there, and he would bring me patches and stuff from the different fighter groups. And so like when you're like, 10, 11, 12 years old, it's the coolest thing ever. So I was always into say that type of environment, like military jets, things like that, helicopters. But that experience of kind of going through that VR thing really set off the bells and whistles of like, I couldn't believe the experience of VR, the experience of going through that, dreaming it as I was a kid, going back, dating myself again to like Battlestar Galactica, watching those Vipers go off through Galactica and just launch out into space. I was like, I was actually doing it.
That's awesome.
That moment became, how do I make this the best experience possible? I knew immediately I didn't need to get a powerful PC, get a real, like say a VR headset or something that was other than the PlayStation. And I started doing that. Got a Valve Index, upgraded my computer, and was playing on a desk. Started getting some controls and whatnot. And then I saw this thing called like a butt kicker, which would shake the chair. I'd put that on my chair. I was blown away. I was
Did you take the wheels off the chair? That's the biggest mistake I made. Was I kept pushing back, and I was like,
exactly. Oh, and so that's how it kind of started. Like, I wanted something, and I wasn't really aware of what was out there still. I was still really investigating it. And I found like this one channel that actually made a cockpit out of PVC pipes.
I've seen that channel. Yep.
Exactly. So I made this small PVC pipe kind of deal, and I had it going on, and it was great. And then let's say the defining next moment was just trying out and testing Dirt Rally 2.0. So that was the next moment.
See, I'm an off-road guy. I race motocross. So now you're talking my language. I love to spin dirt.
Exactly. And I was just like, again, blown away. It was like, I'm in the car. I'm literally in this car driving these tracks. So that became okay, well, how do I improve, my racing experience? Like starting to learn about the different steering wheels, different things like that. And then that progressed into, let's say that the final crust moment was playing Project Cars 2. Now, when I grew up in Los Angeles, I've always been into the fighter jets and stuff, but I've also been into classic cars and working on cars. I got a 67 Camaro when I was 18 years old, just basically a 6-cylinder shell car that didn't have really anything much to do. Bought it for $900. And proceeded to rebuild that for about 2.5 years in my parents' garage. Replaced it with a blueprinted 350 Holly 650 double pumper. It was crazy.
Cool.
And this is pre-internet days. So it was like, went in and I would drive to Long Beach, swap meets. I would go get magazines, got the official assembly manual. So I always loved cars. And I built this 67 Camaro. If you actually go to one of my Project Cars tunings, you scroll all the way down, you'll see a picture of it because I dedicated it to it.
Oh, that is cool.
Long story short, I had that experience in Project Cars 2 of a Camaro driving on Pacific Coast Highway. And it was, again, taking me back to when I was 21. I may or may have not raced every 5.0 Mustang I could find in LA. Drove through Mulholland.
You didn't find mine because you wouldn't have won.
But that was
I pulled mine apart and turned it into a factory 5 AC Cobra. So I shaved over 2,000 pounds off mine.
There you go. I mean, that was my thing. I replumbed it with 1/4-inch fuel line, a whole bunch of different stuff. So I was always into kind of racing back then. And then even through the years, let's say that I had to part ways with that, too many speeding tickets, too many close calls. Ended up getting a 68 Charger a little while later. So I've always been into cars as well. So after that Project Cars 2 experience and kind of feeling it, I knew I was completely committed. It was like, it was all over. It was like, what do I can get to get the best experience? So direct drive wheel, better pedals, shifters, things like that.
Number one advice I give anybody, say get a direct drive wheel.
Exactly. And that's what I would tell anyone that's really starting to look into things. It's like, start with a direct drive wheel, start with good pedals. And if you really love what you're doing, then you can progress to more and more things.
Yep.
Which I'm always shocked when I might see like a CSL steering wheel on a really expensive motion platform.
Quality controls. I know. Honestly, my direct drive was one of the last things I added to my rig, and as I look back, I should have done that first. And it's a Midge motor. I mean, it's a Simu Cube 2, that's home built, but it's the same thing that Chris built from Peacemaker Motion. You know, same type of wheel setup. But I mean, I should have done that. The very first thing I should have done was that. So. Because
it's so immersive. It's the amazing thing that when I switched from a belt driven to a direct drive,
yep.
I remember I was doing iRacing and I was like, oh my gosh, I'm not skidding out all the time. I could feel the slip in the wheels. I could feel all the different things. It's so immersive.
Yep.
But at that point too, I was like, okay, this PVC pipe thing isn't going to work.
It's got to go.
I got to go. So I started like researching about like the different cockpits you can get. And, you know, I'd see all the different things online, JCL, the SimLabs V1X. And to me, still, it was like, those were kind of expensive. They were like a grand $1,100, you know, for this or that. And I was really starting to kind of do a lot more research. Long story short, I'm on XSimulator, xsimulator.net, which is a community, for those that don't know, that really is the basis for a lot of.
It's a forum-based community. That's really good.
Exactly. And it's, if anything, it's the catalyst for what we all know as motion simulators today. It's really honestly where Igor from DOF Reality started and kind of made his business.
He got some flack where he might have stolen some of the Arduino-based builds, but you know what though? He was the first one to package it.
Exactly, and it's the same thing. You know, won't go too much into it, but like what's the same thing with SFX 100, right? They had a community, they had a license, but they closed down because they felt like other people were stealing their license. So you had to go get a sponsor for you to get into the group before you would even be able to start going down that road. And I felt personally like that was like, a community is something that's built by volunteers.
Right.
And before sim racing, let's just say during that kind of period where I wasn't doing PC gaming, I got into competition shooting and things like that, and doing things, and hosting and being able to help that community and being a volunteer in it. And it made me realize like how much a volunteer is important to any type of community, any type of sport. So with COVID that started and many of the competitions and things were canceled, I needed a new hobby. That drive to kind of drive and help people and to help a community grow was still there. Going from before setting up stages and being a chief range officer and different things like that, moved into here's a community that, as we were talking before, it's like there was very little information out there about.
Oh, zero. I was on an island. I was like, you know, these guys over in the Ukraine were great, but there was a language barrier. You know, I'm like, oh my God, I need a community, and that's why I started it. I'm like, I need people.
Yep, and even if you were an xsimulator.net, you know, which is great, you would get to a point where you realized you would need to really spend time learning the engineering, learning the wiring, learning how to work within firmware, learning how to program sim tools, which was very complicated.
Oh yes.
With not a lot of documentation. So I realized like there was this gap there in terms of information. But while exploring on an xsimulator.net, and this is a cue to everyone that's out there that might start a business with motion platforms, a little ad popped up at the bottom, right? For DOF Reality, right? And I knew I never wanted, and I had seen like the butt movers, like the next level racing one, which was like $3,000 or something for a butt mover. And no offense to anyone that has those, I just never could rationalize the idea that my body's going to move closer to my steering wheel or my pedals or move away from it. That from a racing perspective, there's a reason that an F1 driver or any kind of driver is strapped into their seat, locked in, right?
Yes.
Because that difference in movement from your legs moving away from the pedals, even if it's an inch, is enough to throw off your pedal pressure or your steering pressure to feel from that.
Yep. Yeah, I have a friend of mine that built a rig, and his pedal box is stationary, and so is his wheel, but the rest of his body has traction loss, pitch and roll, and yaw. And I'm like, I get in his rig and I get out and I'm like, I feel like I've been a contortionist. I'm like, this doesn't feel right. Exactly. So when he goes, I feel so much better than yours. He goes, yours is more like a rally car rig. I'm like, yeah, but a real car, you get that whole movement. You move all over the place.
Exactly. And so DOF Reality was the only simulator that I could see that had the whole package.
Center yoke, that yoke under your butt, you're going to free float with the entire rig. Yep.
Exactly. And the pedals were attached, the steering column was attached, and that was a big part for me. So I was sitting there looking at, do I spend, and they were a little cheaper back then too. But I was like, do I spend?
Kit. I don't know if you remember, but you could buy it in a kit back in the day. You could
buy
really? Because I was one of their first customers, and I bought their frame, and then I ordered my motors separately because I couldn't source them here. So I had to actually get them from I forget the company, but yeah, I mean, I've got an old, I'll have to send you some pictures, but my system's an early system.
Yep, that's a lot like SFX. It's just like you kind of have to build it your own.
Yeah, well, we talked about before the call. I mean, for anyone that has an early system, you received your control box, and it was a rodent control plastic box. If you actually look at it and you flip it upside down, I think it says Tomcat on the bottom, like the Tomcat rodent company.
That's right.
Some spray painted black. I'm dead serious. I've still got it in my garage. It's on my bench. So.
That's how you do it, back in the day, or even still today. There's certain things that we did and have to do because we're on that fringe forefront of technology, the experience.
Oh, totally. Actually, some of the things I taught DOF, they still use today. Like they were using HP power supplies early on, and they were soldering on the actual cables to the backplane. And I said, you guys know you can order a breaker board for that. They're like, no, we didn't know that. I sent them a link. Now all this stuff is completely modular with the breaker board on it. I'm like, that was me. I sent the information for that.
Exactly. And it's the same thing with the thicker steering columns. And I can't remember his name. I want to say Slavin, but he's on the DOF boards where he came up with the idea of just putting a simple extra 1-inch, 1/4-inch tubing on the side of the steering support, which would eliminate the flex. Long story short, I got another one of the whole steering columns, put them both together so it was all framed up. So it would basically turn from a 1x1 to 1x2.
Correct.
And now, and I remember Igor once saying, like, because I had the YouTube channel, and Igor said, like, a lot of people call up for like Jeff's modification.
Right.
So I could see now that they actually incorporated that into the design.
Yeah. And then, what's funny too is Igor, he's a super nice guy. Yeah. They didn't have anything for social media. So when I spun up the social media group, I also grabbed the Facebook page and the group. So I had them both, and people thought like I own the company. And I'm like, no. I'm like, we're just a support group for them. But like per Igor, he's like, we've answered so many questions and helped him out tremendously. I think it's made their job that much easier. Which is amazing.
Exactly. And it kind of ties back into that kind of volunteering piece. So long story short, I was like, okay, do I spend $1,000 on a static rig, or do I spend $2,000 and get something that moves? And I was like, let's get something that moves and let me see how it works. So that was the beginning of my experience and kind of induction into motion platforms.
That was 2017.
It was right at the end of 2009. So it was the when I got my DOF platform was March of 2020. So
it was a little later than I thought. Okay, so I'm trying to think, because I probably started that group back in 2017, right around this time. So which has been 5.5 years.
Exactly. And like we were saying, like when I joined that group, it was like about 300 people, and that was it. And none of the other real kind of communities existed yet. And so from there, it was kind of like, okay, I have my motion rig, I have all these different pieces, and the builders groups was there, and it is as it is today, which was really sharing a lot of different information. Like I always couldn't remember exactly who did it, but someone came up with I wanted to say it was Shane maybe, that came up with adding a damper to the traction loss.
I believe he was one of the first people to do it. I think you're right.
Exactly. And I did it like the next day, and I was like, oh my gosh.
Yep. And then somebody 3D printed the parts. They were then on Thingiverse, which once again goes back to the group. And what's funny is the group still has that core contact. I mean, we rib each other, we have a good time, but we eliminate, there's no spamming. We kill that stuff immediately.
Exactly.
When I joked around, like, I call you guys the assassins. I couldn't do it alone. I mean, we've got a team of about 10 moderators in there. collectively it runs smooth, and it's the same
Yeah.
group that's in the DOF reality group that's in the motion sim group. I'll link both of those below in the video description for anyone watching. Click on the groups, definitely join them, check them out. I mean, good
Yeah.
guys.
Yeah, and that was it. It was about a community that was about sharing information, being positive. We didn't want it to turn into like anything that was negative, like some of the other like larger groups in sim racing and whatnot. So I was passionate about that.
Yeah, and we weren't tied to like iRacing or Settle Corsa per se. We're more based around the fabricators, the guys that wanted to, get out their Sawzall and their welder and build cool stuff. And that's why the Motion Sim Builders group started, is because we have a lot of people that join the DOF reality group thinking that it was all things DOF. And I keep telling people like, no, it's DOF, like join this group for all things builders. And I think they've kind of both defined their specialties now. Like there's a lot more custom builds in the Motion Sim Builder group.
Exactly. And it kind of going back to that volunteer kind of hobby thing. I immediately started seeing that as a group, like a club group of racers that would go down to the local racetrack every weekend. We all have our own, whether it's a Skip Barber or like a Mazda or whatever it may be, kit cars. Yep. And we're all sharing that information, because in the community I was in before, that's how it worked. We were all competing, but we would all help each other. We would give each other's tips and help each other with whatever it may be to be successful. And that's how I looked at the builders group, was me taking that volunteer thing and kind of helping people come into this sport or hobby. Because it is very daunting at first when you get a platform. It is very overwhelming. Yeah. It's like, how does it work? What does it do?
Yeah.
So,
and I work in IT. So for me, it's like, I always say there's the stupid question is the question not asked. It's like, ask the question. And I think our group does a great job of like, it might seem stupid to you, but we'll help you out. I mean, we'll get you going.
Exactly. So, and I would see that often in other groups. People come in and ask and be like, oh, well, if you search for it, you'll find it. I'm like, that doesn't help, because Facebook search sucks. It's hard to find the information. Yes. So I was like, I will answer the question every single time that I can.
Right. Right. I mean, we can dig through the groups faster than, some people aren't computer literate. I mean, they don't know how to find it. So,
exactly. It's just,
you and I might remember who did the post. And then if you search the person's name, it comes up a lot quicker. But if you've never been there before, you don't know.
Exactly. And it's hard to find those little details about like what size, O-ring that you need for this particular tie rod, or what size, how U-joints. Exactly. How you do that, and how to tighten it, and like, even like
how do I balance my rig?
Exactly. And one of the best tips I ever heard, and in case one tries it, is when you're looking for how loose your U-joint is on, say, your H3 or P3, put a video camera on it.
Yes.
And then move it. And then you might not see it visually while you're looking, but when you take that video, blow it up and watch it on your screen, I could see the movement that I needed to tighten it more. So it was those little tips that you start to learn as I kind of equate back to that club group.
Yep.
So I immediately fell in love with motion. I will always remember those first instances.
So it wasn't the group; it was more the motion, not the group. That's okay.
It was both. It's totally. It's definitely, and that's. I'll get into it, but when I first got my rig, I would play like Project Cars 2 all the time. I'd play Dirt Rally. I'd play iRacing, and was doing the seasons and whatnot. But as a DOF reality builder, right, I started finding myself, as some people might, doing more and more modifications, more and more like, well, I can tweak this, or maybe I want to do that, and slowly my tool set started to expand. Like I got, a drill press, and I got, this type of cutters.
CNC in my garage because of this group.
Exactly. I would love, I've been looking at like those 3D printer CNCs, like the cheap ones that you could get, and going, that would be pretty interesting.
Let me know. I can make you the parts you need to build that machine. You go to Harbor Freight, get the mill. I will make you the parts you need to convert it.
Well, you're the one that, like, when we were talking about, was a 3D printer, right? And I remember you kept asking, and finally I got one, and now I print tons of 3D stuff for my rig. I've made things.
And the thing is, and I tell people, I'm like, if you can assemble your motion simulator, you can run a 3D printer. And I think anyone out there will 100% back me up with that. And you look at the other group, not the DOF reality builders, but the motion sim builders group. Everyone in there has a 3D printer, and they built their parts. Like I interviewed Victor last month. Him and I talked, vastly about that, and how much stuff he has 3D printed, and and that whole side of things has been amazing.
it blows my mind like what you could do with it in terms of just making brackets. Like recently, I had my rig down for maybe about 2 months because I was redoing almost all my brackets for my flight sim stuff.
Yep.
I was surprised at how strong it can be, how easy it is to do. So if you're anyone's on the fence, get one.
Oh,
I just had
absolutely.
a basic Ender 3 V2. You do
You can
little
get
modifications with
that
it.
up at Micro Center has those on sale for
Yeah.
$100 all the time.
Yeah.
So.
And it's just like, boom, it's just, I love it.
Yep.
So
And it's funny, I've been 3D printing for almost 10 years. I started building printers way back then. And it's funny because most people actually coming from the CNC world got into 3D printing. So they're going from, subtraction, material to additive material. I kind of did the opposite because I love 3D printing, but I can't stand is how long it takes. It is excruciatingly painful,
Oh, yeah.
especially for us motion sim guys, because we have to print at 80 to 100% infill. So you're talking solid plastic. I mean, for you to print just for instance, like if you were to print this cube, a Rubik's Cube, that's going to be about a 6-hour print solid.
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. This, I know it's dark there, but like the mount that I have for my Verbal Throttle took, I think it was 27 hours.
Yep,
right?
exactly.
And so you're just like the whole time you're kind of like, oh, hope nothing messes up. And you learn little things like don't open the door and check it. Don't cause a draft because that'll cause it to lift, and all those little pieces. Don't let dust get on it because that dust will go down into the tube and carbonize and cause the filament to goop up.
But that's what got me into CNC because I wanted the speed. I can take material away a lot faster than I can add material. I can take that bit and I can run it right through the aluminum.
Oh yeah, so trust me, I have my hacksaw, I have all my other little stuff that I'll chew up aluminum and wasted pieces and all that fun stuff. But going back to the builder part, that's what I started to fall in love with as well, right? Was figuring out the mechanics of it. And I would say around that March time, I was falling more and more in love with motion. And one of the things that at that point as well, I was getting a little bit more into like how does sim racing studio work, but I was still kind of focused on the mechanical piece. And I knew I was, as many people that kind of get into this hobby, and I would suggest it as well, is that people that are on the fence and not sure if they really want to get into motion simulators, the DOF Reality H3, is what I would recommend to people. It gets you into it.
Entry level, perfect rig. Yep.
And the impact financially will be minimized if you decide not to do it, because we see many people that get it and just don't use it. That hobbies, change, people change, careers,
and they resell fast.
Exactly.
You put a post up, it's gone within 2 days. So.
Exactly. So I knew in my heart, I was committed. I was already, I was sold. So I knew I wanted to upgrade. That's the toughest
part of my new build. Like I don't want to be without a rig. So I'm trying to build a second rig and not be down without a rig. So
Exactly.
Don't tell my wife. Don't tell
I know.
whatever you do.
The backup pieces.
My biggest fear, if anything ever happened to me, my wife thinks I spent like $1,000 on my rig. Just my midge motor alone is $1,000. So if I ever go belly up, you guys gonna quickly contact my wife and get a fire sale on parts.
I'm lucky. Yeah, I totally understand. I am extremely lucky where my wife and I met about 20 years ago, and we met in video game.
Really?
And so she's always been a gamer herself.
That's cool.
She's the one I always was amazed at. I'm kind of in our front living room right now. She's the one that says, why don't we just convert the front living room for the game room, and you can put your motion rig in there, and you have more space.
I'm in the basement and in the garage. That's my domain.
So she supports it, and I think it's mainly because she knows my history with classic cars. And this is a lot cheaper and safer than if I were to go out and get, a Malibu that I was thinking about, or other cars that I would get into.
It's funny,
right?
And I tell people that too. I said, I'm not quite sure. I mean, when I first got my P3, what had me hooked was I had a factory 5, Mach 3 Cobra that I built in my garage with my own 2 hands. My buddy John Smolak helped me out. And when I got my P3 and I jumped to my P3, the very first car I loaded up, AC Cobra. And I got to tell you, it was about 90% accurate. And I was hooked. I'm like, this is incredible. So at that point, I'm loading up McLarens. I'm putting Ferraris in there. I grew up in the 80s, Lamborghini Countach. I'm like, I want to run it all. I'm like, and I was like, and like you and I talked about, you being the tuning wizard, the stuff you put together, the cars feel so real because of what you've developed for the content. It's wild. It's mind blowing.
And that's exactly kind of going back to this when I was talking about the 67 Camaro in Project Cars 2. I had my 67 Camaro, we called it the Beast. I would race up and down Pacific Coast Highway, Topanga Canyon,
trolling for Mustangs.
Mulholland.
We know, we talked about it.
Exactly. I had hats that said friends don't let friends drive Fords.
Of
that
course
kind
you
of
did.
thing, right?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Thank you.
Exactly. So, and I would say, like, anyone that has a set of Corsa, you can actually download the Topanga Canyon road that I used to race on, or Mulholland, which blows me away. But
right, that's the customization of the software. With the Seto Corsa, it's incredible.
It's crazy.
Yep.
Exactly. And
they feel so real. That's what blows me away.
Exactly. So I upgraded to, or I decided, hey, I'm committed to this hobby, gonna get a P6. Got my P6, and I was blown away again. Right. And so for those that are considering it, I'll go over the story, but I was blown away by how the feeling changed from pivoting on the U joint,
three-axis U joint to
a platform
sixth position.
That can move.
Yeah, that's my next build, right?
Exactly. And so that gave me that sense of, like, now it's starting to feel more solid, like a car, in terms of what it can do and move. And with that came, let's start the addiction of tuning, right? Because
I'm playing this out, like, timeline in my head, and I can see
exactly, because it was like, it's
right.
like always like, how can I keep making it better? How can I make this experience
the
more
sim rig
realistic?
is never done. I just talked about that with Victor last week, and I was talking with Chris Murray online, and it's like, and he's got a big YouTube channel. They're never done. They're never done.
I mean, on this thing here, like I said, last 2 months I had it running for a while, but last 2 months I was a program manager, a senior program manager, and I would document everything. I was looking at my list. I think I did over like 100 different small changes I did on this thing. Some of them major, some of them minor.
What's funny? Even then, as you and I doing this interview right now, Victor is actually sending me messages on Facebook with his new cylinders and his pictures. So
exactly,
messages popping up from sim guys going, dude, check this out. My new design's up and running.
Never ends. And that's what's fun. And that's where I would say, right around that time when I got my P6 is when I started to move into and transition from, say, a sim racer or a sim pilot into what I really consider myself now as a sim racing crew chief, right? I'm the guy in the back, like this, I'm designing the car, I'm figuring out how everything works so the drivers, the people out in the community, have a great experience, right? Because it does still come back down to, am I having fun with it? Is it completely immersing myself as well? And so that became the addiction and the fun, to where I still will say, like, I think it was July of last year was the last time I ever did any kind of, like, say, fun racing within iRacing. So it's been,
I'm not,
or maybe it's even been longer.
I don't like the community. I think there's too much, for lack of a better term, political BS with iRacing. So that's why I like Assetto Corsa so much better. It seems to fit more the casual racer, but yet, they've got the Assetto Corsa Comp Zone, which is more serious. That I gravitated more towards that. And I also like dirt rally. I'm a dirt rally guy. I love to go, dirt rally 2.0. I can jump in a Subaru and just rip around a mountain.
Yeah. And the key with iRacing is turn off voice chat. Just don't go down that road, right?
I know, right? Unless you're with friends. If I was riding with you, no problem.
Exactly. So I started kind of like thinking about the motion in of itself, and like what sim racing studio could do and how everything worked. And let's just say, once I had the P6 and kind of like, I think I did my video of the modifications, I was like, okay, I know I'm not done, but let me focus on the software piece and what I can learn and what I can expand on that. Now, long story short, the guys at Sim Racing Studio, Gilbert and Marcelo, are amazing, right?
And they're up in Canada. They didn't me. They're just north of Vermont. Yep.
Exactly. And early in those days, I'd be on Discord, and just talking to them a lot and asking them different questions.
They didn't get sick of you. They didn't block you, huh?
No, that was the thing, right? Because it was like, I've been in gaming a lot for my life, and I know how important it is for people in the community to kind of be a part of that. And I was more blown away by how open they were and how great they were just talking and figuring things out. Now, I know that I was very much a person that was like, hey, how does this work? I would be really like trying to define individual pieces. But let's just say what I ended up doing was I wanted to learn how the back end, like how these tunings work. And Carl Gosling has a YouTube channel, subscribe to you as well, did a great tutorial on, let's call it Sim Racing Studio version 1.0 before, which had a different UI.
I remember
and
that.
he was going through the sliders. But there were certain sections there regarding the max telemetries that were still kind of an unknown in terms of they were hidden and kind of moving them around. And so I wanted to find out more information. So I went to X Simulator to see like what I could find about the basics there in telemetry, but it was still very hard to find.
Yeah, their stuff's locked down pretty good.
Exactly. And even within the Sim Racing Studio information you could find, it was maybe a paragraph, right? And one thing that I couldn't accept was many times people would just say, well, just move the sliders until it feels right. I was like, that doesn't say anything. Like, what if I move this slider this way and that way and it feels horrible? And maybe I feel right here, but what about these other sliders that aren't doing anything? And I just couldn't handle and couldn't accept just move them until it works and everyone will do something different.
Yeah.
So
no two people are built the same. Everyone's body wise is different, and it's if the rig's not balanced correctly, everything impacts it. So
exactly. And the biggest part is I couldn't find any documentation of any software company, motion platform company that said, this is how you tune your platform, other than just move the sliders till it feels right. So I took it upon myself to gather the information I could for, like, say, Sim Racing Studio, and let's call it that version 1.0 of the Sim Motion Tuning Guide. And I was still learning a lot myself. And admittedly, the guide was at that point not so much, hey, community, here's a guide for everyone to use. It was me doing like the classic research paper of where's the data that I can get in to put this paper so I can understand it myself. And if you go to the Sim Motion Tuning Guide that I have, at the very bottom, there'll be a change log. And you will see every single time that I've updated that tuning guide with new information, something else that I've learned.
Yep.
So over the course of several months, I would say at Hound, I would talk to Gilbert and Marcelo and just ask them very specific questions. And they were great. At what
point did they buy you the SFX machine and try to make you go away?
Well, they didn't really. I won't go into details on that too much, but let's just say that they introduced.
I thought they bought your silence. I could have sworn I thought I saw a post on that.
No, it was. Let's just say that they. I don't want to go into the details on that, but let's just say that they connected me with PT Actuator.
There was some backroom deals that went on. I know
exactly. Well, because it got to a point where I would say at the end of 2020, I was starting to inquire and kind of get interested in actuators, right? And learning more about that.
Now I'm building my own.
Exactly. And I'll go into kind of how that became, but I was looking at the different actuator platforms. And as many know, they're rather expensive, but there are certain options that have come along recently, which are pretty cheap. And I was interested in doing that. And so with someone, and I think it's very much like, I wouldn't call it like influencers or anything like that, but when you have power users or people that are using your product, I know PT Actuator was looking to expand as well. Yep. So they and Xiao and whatnot were interested if I'd be willing to be a tuner and have a platform
brand
that
ambassador.
I can do. Exactly, brand ambassador.
I like that,
because I'll be honest,
I need to get some brand deals.
Exactly. I'll be honest, I was waiting for ProSimu to launch their 60 UF platform. They had a 5P platform or something like that. And even then it was still expensive. It was around 9,000 or something like that. It's a lot. And I was like, the thing that I have always been into, which is flight sims, I am an adamant 60 UF guy, right? I need to have all my accesses.
If I'm missing next step.
Exactly. And so a 5D UF platform, which is great for racing. I was a flight guy and I just could not handle giving up yaw. It was just something that I was going to need to do. Well, ProSimu came out with their 60 UF platform and it was like $35,000 or something crazy, right? Now, it's just like for one extra axis. And I know that their target was much more like commercial and whatnot, but I was like, okay, well, that's not going to ever happen. And then PT Actuator is like, well, we have this one and we'd be willing to, XYZ, provide you one. So I was like, sure. Well, I'm not going to complain, but there was still costs on top of that. I had to buy a P1X frame and go from there.
I know you had to sell your old H3. I remember.
Exactly. So,
but
well,
you know what's funny though, is you're still involved, even though you're not still, actively running that rig. You still support that community.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like it was my car club. It was where my friends are at. It
That's
was
where we
the
started,
builders,
right? Exactly. Yes.
right. And I would still say it's the entry level place, right? Would I tell someone to go out and drop 15 grand or something on an actuator platform that's pre-built? No, I'd be like, no, you don't even know if you like this yet. And there's many people that get into sim racing that don't like it and or liked it at first and get bored and move on to different hobbies. And $15,000 is a huge investment.
Yeah, and that's kind of I never thought about that, but that's a great point. Like now with both the groups that we have spun up that we all kind of admin and moderate, which is fantastic, is we almost have that entry level DOF turnkey solution, and then we have the motion builder where it's kind of the DIY, build your own setup. So it's like you kind of start here, move up to here, and it's the same group of guys. So we kind of have that build up system, kind of like when you start racing in general. You start at novice level and you go to the amateur pro level. We kind of have that stepping stone now.
Yep. And not everyone has the ability to have a shop or have, the ability to cut metal, right? There's people that live in different cities and apartments or whatnot that might not have access to that or might not be familiar with just, being comfortable with doing do-it-yourself type of modifications and whatnot, and might not feel comfortable building an SFX platform.
Yeah, I think a lot of people would tell you the truth. It's their entry level, I think, in using tools. A lot of these guys are techie guys that are, I've been lucky. I've been around tools my whole life, but some of these guys are more computer programming gamer types that don't even own a screwdriver. And we're telling you, hey, go buy a Sawzall. You're going to cut metal this weekend.
Exactly. And, and I had no fear because like here I was 19, 20 years old, stripping down a 67 Camaro to the rails, rebuilding it before YouTube, right? Before the internet, you had to figure out things. So, so I've always loved just kind of modifications and whatnot, and kind of jumping back to where I was with the P6 before I got this rig was the tuning aspect. And I looked at that as something, and I saw very quickly there was this vacuum, this overriding vacuum of just information for anyone that wants to get into this hobby. And
use the word vacuum, I call it addiction.
Exactly. But I saw this opportunity for someone to be able to volunteer to help, to come in and help the community, because I would see it as I was doing sim racing. You would go and download profiles or force feedback profiles for project cars, and it might be like Christian's force feedback modifications, or in Virpil, like with flight controls and Virpil flight controls. There's a YouTube channel called Havoc Company, where the guy really goes in depth to how to program your Virpil gear, how to set it up, how to troubleshoot it. And he's just a regular user. But Virpil will help him out and give him gear to test and do things so he can talk about it.
Right.
So my goal was never like, hey, I'm going to do this and get gear or something like that. And even like the YouTube channel is not even something I promote. You never see my face on it. I don't want to be like, hey, this is my channel. It's like, it's all about information. And so much like, my previous hobbies, I was like, I'm going to volunteer myself because I love it. I want to figure it out and I want to share it with everyone.
It's kind of how I started the group. Same thing. That's why I started the channel. I just want to build the community. I want to give people the resources they need. I like to see people succeed. I like to see, I hate to say, I like to see people struggle, but I like to see the struggling person and then to overcome that struggle and be like, hey, look, I got it to work.
Yeah. I had 2 people in Discord just yesterday, like figuring out something I was able to help them out with troubleshooting, where their platforms were working. They're like, wow, right? That's the thing I love.
Right.
The best feedback I ever get is when someone has a car or a game they're playing on their DOF and they're like, it wasn't something I was having fun with, but then I used your profile and it fundamentally changed how I looked at it, that I was having fun and now I love it. That's what I really shoot for. And that's what drove me in terms of tuning. And so I had to sit down and kind of really figure that out. Like, here's the basic information, and I would go and test and see how things worked. And back then, Sim Racing Studio was still developing a lot of like the core pieces of it. And they were so open and still open to like suggestions and whatnot, to where I would spend hours with Marcelo or like working on, I remember there was a 24-hour almost straight thing that we did when Microsoft Flight Simulator first came out to get it to work, to figure out to get a base tuning and get it out.
Yep.
So it was fun in that regards. But I also had to like overcome like, you know, and really kind of start to develop, like, let's call it a system. Like, what is max telemetries? How does that really work? What are the limitations of it? And there were some challenges there in the beginning because there was some guidance and things out there. I call it the divide by 3 rule, which was you gather telemetry and you divide it by 3 and you put that in your max telemetry. But that would always result to me, retrospectively, in inaccurate metrics. Like it would just always be very jerky and move really fast. And as most of us know, is when you first get into motion simulator, you want that kind of arcade, like amusement ride, shaking and movement and crazy and like, oh, that looks
thrill.
great.
Yeah, the instant
exactly.
thrill. Yeah, but it's not
but
real.
But as you progress, you realize that's not, doesn't feel immersive. It doesn't feel real. You can't feel the details, and that some, you know, people will look at a motion platform that's not moving a lot and like, oh, that doesn't move much at all. It looks like a boat. And it's like, well, it's feels real though. It's and there's those micro changes in there that, and I'll get into the tuning piece, but that's what I wanted to figure out, was like, what is the real max telemetry? And Sim Racing Studio was great. And we used to work, and those before like where we're at today, we used to only be able to take what's called like a snapshot of telemetry, which was like, what was the maximum and minimum amount that happened during that session? And working with Marcelo, and let's call it the moment that changed everything, was when we worked together and we were able to create an export of telemetry over time, that I was able to look at telemetry from the very beginning and how it would peak and valley over a period of time was when you raced around the track. What that allowed me to start doing was looking at what I always call accurate max telemetries, which is where in the racetrack does it spike? And if that spike is that something that would normally be felt in the car? And what I started to find was those spikes impacted the actual max telemetry in a negative way, which would eliminate being able to feel those fine details in the road. That would eliminate, that would, like, if you swerved and hit another car, boom, your sway spikes really high. And if you use that value, you won't really feel the sway of the car. The same thing with acceleration. So through this process and just trying different things and going through all the different games, I would say I started to see, like, I wouldn't call it patterns, but how max telemetries work. And that's where I would say the tuning really started to begin, because it became, oh, okay, now I understand max telemetries, how the sliders work. And Sim Racing Studio provided a lot of information. And as you go through that tuning guide, more and more of it would change into a little bit more accuracy, a little more like, this is how this works, this is how that works.
It started to make sense. It all started to come together.
Exactly. And that, you know, the best pieces I could say that were clicking for me was, one, there is no universal like plug and play, right? Many people think, oh, it's like a joystick controller, or it's like a speaker system. You just plug it in and it works with the game, which I think almost everyone does. It's like, oh, it supports Assetto Corsa. Like, this motion platform will work with, you know, R Factor 2.
It's kind of like programming your buttons on your wheel and your pedals and whatnot. Like mine are all programmed specifically for what I like to do. Like, I hit a certain button for to look back, you know, a certain button for, you know, for adjusting my clutch, you know, that type of stuff. So
exactly. It very similar. And what I realized was, well, the telemetry for a Mazda MX-5 or a go-kart is vastly different than, say, a GT3 F1 or a Porsche 919. And you would see those differences. And so therefore I realized, like, a general tuning doesn't work anymore, right? You can get a general tuning and it'll move the platform, but if you want it to feel real, right, you need to find where that telemetry, where a performance curve might be. And that you might have many GT3s that feel the same. There might be like a slight difference between, say, a Mercedes front engine versus, you know, another type of engine like mid-engine GT3 in terms of the traction loss, but fundamentally they're the same. But then I would switch to another sim and see differences in the telemetry. Specifically with like Assetto Corsa and Assetto Corsa Competizione, they have some very low like heave telemetry, which is why they might not feel as good on the road as say some of the other sims. It's just how the developer exports the telemetry.
Yep.
And it was that light bulb that realized where I was like, oh, okay, this is all dependent upon the game engine that these places make, that developers use. It all depends upon what the developers put in for the track. And so everything will be different. And that's when I would say I moved away from being like a sim racer to a sim racing crew chief, because it's like, wow, there's this whole world that I get to go in there and see, like, can I make this car feel right? Can I go into that sim and make it feel amazing?
Right.
And that became a goal and a fun thing. And the funnest part to me is I feel like, I think many people get a sim racing game and they focus on that. And I like GT3 and that's what they want to focus on. For me, it became, I want to try everything. I want to see what this car feels like, that car feels like, this sim feels like, that sim feels like. And that's why you see me put those ads out like,
you're like,
hey,
a
everyone,
kid
I'm about to tune
store.
this.
Exactly.
Exactly.
Candy store. Couldn't,
and it was like, in a weird way, I felt like I'm a virtual, like, say, professional driver that gets flown around the world to test all these different cars to give feedback to the manufacturers on how it works.
Sure,
right.
Sure.
And so through that process, people would give me suggestions for cars. I would tune them. And it was fun. And it still is fun because it's like cars I would never drive. I was like, oh my God, I love this now. Right.
Now I got to ask Jeff. Now, what do you do full time for work? Are you full time doing sim tuning? I'd love to. I hope you told me yes, but I know you're going to tell me no. You're still.
I guess you could technically say right now I am a full time tuner.
Okay, that's good.
So before this, I worked for 12 years as a senior program manager for Amazon. Exactly.
For
figure.
Amazon. Yeah.
And you could say that I was part of the, I guess, a great resignation where I was like, you know what, it's time for me to do something different.
Sure.
So fortunately, I was in a position to where I could take an extended amount of time off, really figure out what my next steps in my career are going to be. And I'm still kind of looking at that, right? I'm still very passionate about the sport. Or this hobby. There's been people that donate all the time, or the companies that might give me things and whatnot, which is great to tune. But the next step is going to be, like, I think, is not about career money. It's about what makes me happy. And then it might be
you'll never work another day the rest of your life.
Exactly.
Yep.
So I might do some consulting. I might do some stuff. Maybe this video people will ping me and say, hey, would you want to do this? Cool.
Absolutely.
But yeah,
Jeff is available, folks.
Exactly.
Jeff, you've got a project, reach out to Jeff Weaver. He's got time right now.
Exactly. But I think that comes through in a lot of the stuff that I do and created. It was that the majority of the time what I did was focus on integrating, new products into a worldwide customer service network in terms of order for it to be supported. So I was there on the front line advocating for customers and different things like that in terms of getting support set up in different call centers globally, things like that, how we handle call volume, what we do in call, and escalated issues, contact trends, things like that. So I'm very passionate about, customer service in that regard. So I just took that passion, that energy, and said, how would I help this community and doing things? I'm like, the number one thing I have to have is a help guide. The second thing I need to do is be engaged with the community. And so there was some definite, my wife would say, like, definite goals that I had early on, which was, I want to help this community grow. I want to help Sim Racing Studio grow. I want to help anyone that's in this community have fun with it, because it is so amazing. And so I just wanted to kind of fill that spot. And I was like, well, here's that vacuum of no one really knowing how tuning works.
So damn well, because we're all the same. Because we all like we said, the group has that same vibe it did when it was 300 people to now it has almost 9,000 people.
Exactly.
And I'm still shocked it retains that, and I'm proud. I'm real happy that that's done that.
Exactly. And I'm passionate about that, and I'll maintain it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm doing this stuff for freaking until I'm in a retirement hole and I can't move.
You're currently laid off.
Exactly.
We'll call it between careers.
Exactly. So it's great, right? And it's neat that I have this hobby, and that from a tech perspective, it'll always get better.
Yeah.
And even from tuning, I'm always like, the classic. I'm a perfectionist. Yes, it's a classic thing, but it is a great thing and it is an evil thing because I'm never
Right.
done with it. There will be literally times where I've been tuning motion profiles where I'm like, well, I can just make it a little better. I can make it just a little bit better. Let me just try this. Let me try. And there'll come a point, and it's funny. I have this, there's different modes that I have. And let's call it the final approval mode that I'm in is like, am I enjoying the lap? Is there a lap? Have I done several laps where I'm not thinking about what needs to be improved? My wife will call it like the yelling factor because I'll be like, yeah, this is, oh, yeah, whoa, yeah, you know, I'm just so immersed. When I
love
get
it.
done with those laps, I'm like, it's done. Put it, you know, put it
Sure.
out.
Yeah, you can only do so much with the recipe before you ruin the product.
Exactly. So you know, kind of jumping back to tuning, it was that whole thing and that art of figuring it out, right? Like, what are the details? What are the nuances? You know, sometimes I'll say it's like it's trying to listen to a whisper in a hurricane. Can I find that telemetry? Can I find that setting that brings that experience to life? And literally, there are times that it is a single digit that makes the difference between this feels weird to wow, that feels good. A
Sure.
single digit.
Yep. It's just like a real off-road dirt bike. Like,
Yeah,
one click out and the rebound adjuster and the rear shock can make the world of difference. It's just,
exactly.
it's real racing's like that. I mean, you take a little bit
Exactly.
out in the toe or the kick on the, or the bump steer, you'd be shocked what that one nut turn will do. So same thing with
Exactly.
tuning because it's like a real car.
It's
Yeah.
totally the same. And that one variable over here might change that variable, and you change it, you need to go back and check. So,
Yeah. And what's great, Jeff,
so
is think about it. Your experience as a car guy is completely transparent through to being a sim car guy.
it's that's
Which is huge because guys that are just solely sim racers only, I'm not quite sure can relate it to the way a real car would feel or how to make the adjustments to make that real car perform.
exactly
So
because I have that memory of, you know, one of them is racing a Porsche 911 on Mulholland, whether it was a
yeah.
long time ago, but it's those kind of things that I used to do, and that the feeling in the bottom of your seat is everything,
Oh
right? The
God, yeah.
feeling of the wheel, feeling of like how the car is responding, but it's always the seat, right? It's always the back and how you're reading the car and the feeling of what it's about to do so you can react to it.
Yep.
The weight transfer, those different
Mm-hmm.
elements that are involved in racing. And the best feedback I ever get, which is the greatest part, will be from people that are actually racing, that have raced on
Absolutely.
Donington, that are
Yep.
actual pilots or whatever they may be. That's the feedback I always look for. And that's why, and I'll admit, it was very scary the first times I started putting out my profiles and asking for feedback because,
Yep.
you know, I look at it as kind of like art. I look at it as very much like a chef. And like, here are all
Sure.
these different ingredients I'm putting together. Do you like my meal?
Yeah,
And that people will
absolutely.
come back saying like, oh no, that sucks, right? But the community was always really positive, and I would get the feedback at times where someone would say something and it would really make me go back and look at it and adjust things.
Yep.
And
And if
not
we
to
really
say
disagree, we just delete and block them. So it wasn't a big deal.
exactly. So it just
I know I'm
became
tough.
this. Yeah. No, it's, hey, there's sometimes I've done, you know, we've had
We've had a few
our
people we've had to
nemesis.
block along the way,
Exactly.
but by and
Exactly.
large, I don't think maybe 100 people all in, which isn't bad when you consider how many people
Yeah.
have
No,
joined.
it's about being positive.
Yeah, there was that one guy, I
And
forget his name, he was a real pain.
Yep. Oh yeah. But from the tuning, it just kept growing, and that's where it was like throughout the end of 2020, I loved it, you know, and I still love it, and it was adjusting these different things. But let's say, what was the point that Jeff decided to go to actuators? Well, I've always had tons of fun with my P3 and P6. So I never will speak ill of those or whatnot. But one of the things I was always very passionate at, going back to the beginning of the discussion, was flight sims.
Yep.
And that I loved IL2, and is a World War II simulator, flight simulator, a DCS, which everyone knows, and Elite Dangerous are games that are just like in my heart, right? I
Near and
just
dear to you.
love
Yep.
them.
Yep.
There, and so then the ability for the platform to move smoothly on those particular axes was not great. Right now,
Mhm.
DOF has come out with the new gears, which I think are going to fundamentally change a lot of those issues that they had. But at that time, I wanted to see like how I could get something smoother, and I knew at that point, after doing a lot of the tunings for DOF, being involved in the community, I knew I was not going anywhere, right? So 5, 10, whatever $1,000 was now on the table,
Yep.
right? It's a lot cheaper than if I was going to go out and buy a McLaren.
Oh, sure.
or
A
something like
fraction of the
that.
cost.
Right.
Absolutely.
And
Yep.
and that's honestly where I was getting to, is like, do I want to buy a car? Or do I want to do
Sure.
something like this? And I was like, well, if I
It's
buy
cheaper
this
on gas
car,
too.
exactly, and cheaper on tickets, and I'm not the kind of guy that's like drives 55. If I have that car,
Yep.
I'm
I've
going.
had real race car drivers in my sim and they're blown away. And I've got
Yeah.
an older P3 and I mean, and I would give it a solid C plus, B minus
Hmm.
grade. I mean, it's not a P6, it doesn't have the 6 degrees of motion, but it's accurate, especially. And we talked about the controls, with that direct force feedback wheel, it's incredible how good the car feels.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
yeah. And
So
I've had one of my buddies races at Lime Rock in Connecticut. He runs almost the same lap speed on my sim as he does in a real Mazda MX-5 Cup Series car.
yeah,
And he's gotten out of it and he goes, Dave, that thing feels incredibly accurate. And I'm like, that's my goal. Is I want to be the David Copperfield of sim racing. When you sit in my rig, I want you to feel like it's real. So
that's a great, that I love that you brought up David Copperfield, because that is another piece of tuning that I really strongly believe in, which is tuning in a motion platform is never going to emulate the real world. Why? Because it just can't emulate G-forces.
correct.
And that, sometimes I worry that a lot of people will think, well, larger actuators will give me more G-force. And it's like, you need to be careful when you get to certain sizes because of the telemetry that you're utilizing. I think a lot of people focus on the hardware. Not enough people really focus on what is the telemetry that this game is going to be able to provide for your experience, right? Because at the end of the day, these rigs don't do anything unless the telemetry from the game is coming.
Correct.
And if that telemetry works a certain way, your rig might not work well with it. And case in point would be gear shifts, right? That just based off of physics, the telemetry changes in terms of moving forward or backward might be so fast that if I only have, say, 100 to 150 millimeter actuator and the telemetry movement is only maybe, a centimeter, you'll feel that in that
Right.
split second of the gear shift. If you suddenly get a 300 millimeter actuator and still using the same telemetry and the same max telemetry, that movement is no longer just 10 centimeters, it's 30 centimeters.
Yep.
And that's going to be a lot harder of a shift.
Right.
So there does come a point where with larger actuators that certain movements might feel good, but you're always going to be constrained by the telemetry of the output of the game and how quickly that telemetry is changing. And I can guarantee you, for those that might think like, I want a really big hexapod system that'll move really far because it'll generate those accesses, I guarantee you after the first few weeks, you're going to be like, this is painful, I need to turn it down. Right. And now you're working almost within 150 to 200 millimeters. Right. So it's those things that for me, I wanted to figure out, because
and I think it depends what you're after too. Like I tell some of the guys that have been interested in getting, like I've sold a few rigs over the course of the last 5 years. I sold it to one guy specifically like to drive left, who's a big NASCAR guy, left turn only, he liked the round guy. So I built his rig based around that, like he didn't want, curved screen. He wanted just a 55-inch, flat panel. But I'm different. I'm a dirt rally guy. So for me, I'm building my 60 OF machine because I want to have that weightless sensation. I want my rig to drop 18 inches when I come over that crest of that hill. I want that roller coaster feel.
Exactly. And what I mean by that too, though, is that's part of the tuning, right?
Yes.
Is that the more information I can get out there, that someone that has that platform will be able to adjust the surge to fit within that longer stroke, as well as keep the movement within, say, sway. So you can feel those large transitions, that you can feel the differences in pitch, and that if you're tuning, say, a flight simulator, who the hell cares about gear shifts, right? So it's that thing of when I started finding kind of building out that my tuning guide is you will go through it and see that there's sections that I really define, like, are you doing rally racing? Are you doing drifting?
Yeah.
Are you doing flight sims? Are you doing road racing?
Because they're all very different.
They're all very different. And that kind of ties back to that. I think a lot of people come into this hobby going like, well, it supports Assetto Corsa. It's like, yeah, it does, but you need to tune it, because if you're really into like racing a Porsche 919, it's not going to feel the same as if you're
like
doing a classic car.
My dad's got a brand new Corvette, and I compare that to like the Cobra, and it's an interesting feel because he's got a brand new 2020 Corvette Stingray, nice car, but it doesn't have that throw you back in the seat type feel where the Cobra the hood almost wants to come off the ground. Like
Yeah.
you get that. So if you look at the rig, your rig tilts back like this when you have that shift point, where the
Yep.
Corvette wants to kind of do this. So
Yep.
it's all tuning. You know,
that's all tuning.
Yes. Yeah.
And
to put it in perspective of the people that are kind of watching going, what are these two guys talking about?
It's those little differences, like being able to, and granted, that was another thing with there's certain limitations with the DOF hexapod system in terms of what it can and can't do in terms of adding in different effects based on different axes. And anyone that wants to get into it can always message me and I can get into the details of it because it gets really weird. But those minor changes in terms of platforms and whatnot is something also I was interested in terms of, you know, how things work on a grander scale. So one day I will do a large tuning video. It's such a weird thing. I'm sure it's going to be a multi-hour part series of like a lecture because there are so many different factors that go into it. I just can't cover it in just one thing.
Yeah, you have to kind of pick a track, pick a vehicle, and start there. That
exactly.
The best thing versus trying to do like you can't just say I'm going to do
I'm going to do everything
mid-engine. That's not going to work.
Exactly, and like that's something I will take on. But you should see the Excel files that I have, the data that I have. It just gets crazy. But that's what I love, right? And that's why I always think of myself as a sim racing crew chief. But the tuning got to that point where finally I felt like I was starting to hit that realistic thing. And like you said with David Copperfield, I look at tuning as an illusion,
100%,
right? Is that what I focus on are creating moments. I don't try to focus on creating like the 1-to-1 ratio of what the car will feel like. It's impossible. But what I can do is make it so that when you hit that bump, it feels right. When you hit that corner and you come out of the traction loss, it feels right. It's not slamming you around.
Yep.
It's all about the illusion that fools your brain, and that
it creates that memory. Like I want to trick you. Like when you get out of my rig,
exactly.
Do you remember when I came out of that turn 5 and I had that car sideways? I just missed the guardrail. I'm like,
exactly.
I'm sorry, you remember it because you felt it. So
exactly. And it's like it was my one of my tenets is always like, I want to feel the car. I don't want to feel the platform. Right. If I'm feeling the platform and I can feel it shake, it's too strong. Right.
Yeah.
It's like I need to get it immersive. And
sure. And everyone's different too, the way people feel it. Like that's why it's custom tunes, because like we talked about, no two people are the same. So
exactly.
you need to find your comfort zone. Like I'm an off-road guy, so I like the car to feel loose. You know, I want that that sliding, WRX type feel. Like, and I even do that in a Assetto Corsa. Like I'll intentionally try to get that car into a four-wheel slide when it's not supposed to.
Yep, exactly. And it was the getting into the, like, how does it feel? How does it, the illusion of it, creating it will create those moments of pure immersion. And I always remember one time I was tuning, oh man, what was it? Maybe it was iRacing or something. It was a kart. It's one of my kart ones in a dirt rally track. And I had everything going on my P6. I had the shaker kits, I had the wind kits, I had the tuning going, and I was getting it perfected. And I remember there's this one point where I swear still today that I could taste the dirt in front of me.
Awesome.
I could taste the dirt of the
so
car.
You're that immersed.
And I was like, this is just amazing.
That is awesome.
So my path has always
been. Speaking of immersion, so we haven't covered. So what do you prefer? Do you prefer VR or monitors?
Oh, VR completely.
So that's funny because I'm torn almost straight down the middle. I can do VR. It doesn't make me sick at all, but it's kind of funny. From an immersion perspective, I'll throw the VR on and I feel really good. But if I've got 3 or 4 of my buddies over, I think it's so much more fun to run with the curved monitor, because I've got a 49-inch Samsung, the Super HD, which
I have one of those too.
I see it on your rig. Yep.
Yeah, I use that for tuning. Like I'll do my initial tunings on that just because it's so much easier to see Excel.
Yep. Now, is that stationary or is that attached to the rig?
It's stationary.
It is stationary. Mine's on the rig. I'm on the mine right to my P3.
Yeah, and it's because one of the reasons I keep it stationary is because I tune. I have to work sometimes with very violent motion until it gets tuned. It's gotten a lot better now, but
well, wait a minute. That sounds like it's great video. You should definitely attach it. And come on. So what if I bought you a monitor just for that destruction?
One on this platform once, I was tuning something. I was testing a spike filter, and I cranked it way up, and I did a roll. Like the most violent thing you could do in a sim racing or a sim rig is roll your car violently. Like you can crash into walls, you can go off cliffs, fine. The moment you roll, that thing, and it was going so fast. I remember I was at least pulling 2 Gs. And I was like, holy crap.
It's
like,
funny when people get my rig, they always ask, like, do I really need the e-stop button? I'm like, you have no idea. I'm like,
oh yeah,
yes, you do. I've used mine on many occasions.
I've used it a couple times because
and I've got
sometimes
two. I've got one for my wheel and one for the rig. So
yeah. It's one time ejecting from an airplane in IL-2. It was so violent I could not hit an escape key. You're just moving, so you just need that button to hit it.
When I first set up my midge motor, I cranked it up a little too high. I think I was running it at around 25 or 30 Newton meters. And and I could tell when I first started, I'm like, oh, I got to turn this thing down. I was getting arm pump, and then I hit the wall, and thank God I had my thumbs on the outside of the wheel, because that thing jerked. I'm like, it would have dislocated my thumb. I snapped it.
Oh yeah.
So it's and now I've got to tune back. I run it right around like 18 or 19, just under 20, depending on the track. But
I've sprained.
I've
sprained my finger
twice
in racing on my
in a video game.
Exactly. Video game injury. So I can talk forever. I know we've been going for a bit, but like the tuning aspect just became this wonderful world of figuring out how everything works, not just how racing works.
Three. I mean, you think about the tuning is what connects it all. I mean, it's one thing to build the rig. It's another thing to have the software with the telemetry. But if you don't have that tune in the middle that is meshing both of those together, you're pretty much the transmission. You're that transmission between the person and the rig and the software. So
exactly. I'll see those giant, $100,000 motion platforms and going like, why is it moving that way? Like, do they do they really know what the telemetry is doing? Or I'll watch giant hexapod systems and they're not utilizing sway or surge whatsoever. I'm like, why are they? It's basically a 4DOF rig.
Right.
So there's a lot of nuances and things that you learn as you go through. The only thing that I ever tell anyone is like, you have to start and practice. One thing that you were mentioning about like profiles, the feedback when I knew I was in the right zone, like I was saying, I was always looking for like how things kind of work, and nothing's always perfect, but when the feedback I would get would be like 25% it's too strong, 25% it's too weak, and 50% everyone loved it, I knew I had it. Because everyone's going to be a little different. And so don't be afraid to play with the sliders, read the tuning guide. There are certain things you shouldn't do, but Sim Racing Studio is one of those neat things where it's really designed not to destroy your platform, right? You can go into Sim Tools.
Safety features, correct.
Exactly.
Yes.
You can go into Sim Tools and you can literally set things that will literally tear your platform apart. Right. And so, but Sim Racing Studio, you really just can't do that. So, working with them, they would take feedback. We've done things on fixing telemetry at times, adding new features, and we're still moving forward. I still talk to Gilbert and Marcelo all the time. And so they've just been positive.
That's awesome.
And from that just became the opportunity to meet other companies and get a different platform. It's
been great. I mean, that's how you and I connected. That's how you and I built the community. It's been amazing to be a part of such a cool thing. So
and that's the thing. We're like, I don't plan on going anywhere anytime soon. I got more. I'm actually have a lot on my plate because I'm going to be retuning a lot of everything with split surge telemetries. And that's the thing I would love to do is I really want to help like the DOF community. But as you indicated, I sold my platform last year. But the thing that the DOF community is going to need soon is a tuner, someone like me, that will be able to go through and readjust, because those new
motors, new gearboxes,
the new motors, are going to change things. They're going to change how things
taking the lashes all out of it. There's going to be no lash now. So
exactly. And I don't know if they've upgraded sensors. That might be another thing, but that's when you have to start analyzing, like, does it need more smoothing? Does it need to be adjusted this way? So I'm always going to be a part of that.
I wouldn't be surprised if you have one that shows up at your door to say, Jeff, we need some help. It wouldn't shock me at all. And it wouldn't shock you either. I know it wouldn't, right?
I'll take it, right? I have no qualms. Because that's the thing, right? I love it tuning. I love creating,
but that's what makes it such an immersive experience. I mean, without guys like you and I that have this community and have helped with the tuning and keeping people engaged and wanting more, these companies would have a tough time succeeding. I think. And Igor's
Exactly.
even told me that. Like Igor's thanked me, I can't tell how many times. And and unfortunately, he sent me many a parts where I'm like, hey, I need this, and yep, no problem, just shows up. And I truly appreciate it. I mean, it's and you know what? And it wasn't for that, like they wouldn't be where they are today. Like we helped.
Exactly.
He used to send me stuff like, try to break these.
Exactly. It's and that's how I look at it. It's like the more that DOF reality is successful, the more that Sim Racing Studios is successful, the more that PT Actuator is successful.
Yep.
All that does is create more and more people, community that love this hobby.
Yep.
All that's going to do is create more options, more opportunity, drive down prices, hopefully.
Yeah. And I'm trying to build a repository for us, like guys that can help people. That's why I created the YouTube channel, where I want to do interviews and I want to do some how-tos, and I want to help kind of drive people more into the community that we built, and just further develop like the DIY community. Like I think more people can do this that are unaware they can do it, and educate them. So like you and I talked about before, that's engaging for me. Like it's like when I built my Factory 5, like I built a car from boxes like that. I mean, it was so cool. People were like, oh, where'd you buy that from? I'm like, oh, I built it. Like, you did what? I'm like, yeah, I built the car.
Yeah. And I love this platform. There's positives and negatives for every type of platform, even a hexapod versus this.
Absolutely.
And again, I'm always willing to talk to people about what my thoughts are. But I can see myself one day just building a hexapod system just to do it. Sure. Just to figure it out, just to try it. The problem now is like, I just don't know where I'd put it in this house.
And I'll be honest, I've actually thought about doing that too. I've got my own consulting company. I'm an IT director for a big company, but I also have a small shop as well. And that's getting less and less busy. And my father-in-law manages it for me. And I keep telling him, I said, I'm going to turn that into a virtual sim racing studio. And I want to get like 4 or 5 rigs down there. And I said, if I put a pizza oven and a bar room in, I'm like, you'll have a line out the door. And he thinks I'm crazy. Yeah. And I said, I'm telling you, I'm not. I said, you'll have car guys down here for hours on end.
and that's exactly it. Like that was one of my focuses, was to take this hobby from feeling sometimes arcadish or this really isolated small community to where everyone would be able to enjoy it, to the people that didn't know about it go like, wow, this could really feel this way, that it can really feel like a car.
Yeah. And I've had a few people jump in my rig and try to treat it like it's an arcade game, for a lack of a better term, like it's it's like the Need for Speed, one of those games. And I'm like, no, it's not. I said, drive it like it's a real car. Would you jump in a brand new Corvette and start banging gears off the lot? No. I'm like, you would go slow for the first 5 to 10 miles, get the feel of the car. I'm like, drive this sim the same way, and you're going to enjoy it so much better. And it's true. I said, give it 5 to 10 minutes warm up. I said, as you feel a little better, start to wind the gears a little bit more. I take it up into that red line, and then start heel toeing it. But until then, drive it like a normal car, and then like learn what's going on around you. So
it's one of those things that I knew I locked in, like say surge telemetry for braking, where sometimes people would be like, oh, it's like when I stop, it just really shakes the rig. I go, well, when you're in your regular car and you're going up to a stoplight, do you just slam the brake down all the way down? Right. Because that's going to cause your car to like do that. Exactly, right. How do you do it? You hit it and then you let off right as you're about to stop. Right. Yeah. And that's when I knew it's like, oh, I locked into the realistic aspect. So even if I was in a F1 race car, they're not going to go up to the pit and just slam it, and they're going to come up and just right at the last.
See, now, in my mind, I'm going to heel toe that, Jeff. I'm coming around and I've got my foot cockeyed. Now I'm going to hold second, and I'm going foot and clutch same time.
Yep. Oh man, it's like, and that's the other thing that doing all this tuning was someone had a request for the supercar at Bathurst. I think it was 2020 or something like that. And they're like, hey, could you do that? And I was like, I was watching. And one of the things I also do is a lot of research. Like I will watch YouTube videos of in-game or in cockpit cars of the real drivers, so I can see the movement of I could see how the car is moving for that particular class. And the best thing is if those in-game have, or not in-game, but the real racers have a G-force meter. Yep. And I can see like how they're doing. So I watched a lot of Bathurst stuff. And I remember like, okay, well, if I want to tune something, this is also something I'm passionate about, and that actually takes the longest part of tuning, is if I'm going to tune it, I need to learn how to drive this thing.
Sure.
Right. Because if I can't drive it, I can't collect good telemetry. So that's been a bonus. And one of the things I had to learn, and oh my God, I can't tell you how, I think it was a couple of weeks at least, was learning accurate heel toe shifting on Bathurst in a supercar. And once I learned that, I was like, oh my God, I love it. Right.
That's
And
cool.
and learning how to do trail braking, learning how to drive with 2 feet, those kind of things. Right.
And you laugh too. You talk about heel toe and driving. That was part of my upsells when I got my first rig. Was my oldest daughter was learning how to drive, and she was 16. This is 5 years ago. And I told my wife, I said, if we got if I built the racing sim, it would really help with my daughter.
Absolutely.
You laugh though, Jeff. It 100% did.
100%.
She jumped right in a stick. She can drive a stick shift just fine, and she never drove one on a real road. She just drove in the sim only. So that speaks volumes for how far the technology's come. So.
Exactly. And that's the reason why a lot of my videos have my foot cam, because I'm like, when I do, like, if I'm driving a Subaru and I'm doing like rally and I'm shifting, it's like, you're going to see my shifts. I'm not cheating.
Sure.
I'm like driving this thing.
I do the same thing with streams. I put a camera on my feet too sometimes. So you have to.
Yeah, and that's what makes it fun. And plus, it's able to see the smaller motions and stuff like that. But that overall is just the what I'm always focused on tuning. Like I said, I'll do a video one day, and maybe try to put it in the guide. Every time I start to do it, it's like that overwhelming. Like I don't even know where to start.
Sure, right. Like I said, you have to break it down. Single car, single track. So
exactly. And the future is even more. Like I constantly work with Sim Racing Studio and different little improvements we can continuously do, little feedbacks and things like that. So that's awesome. That's the neat thing to me is like, this hobby is going to continue to grow. VR, like kind of going back to that one. It's going to be, because I agree. Like I, for a long time was like, say, VR snob. I got that monitor. Once you figure out your field of view, get it set right, it's very immersive. Right.
Yes.
So I totally get
49-inch. You can cover a lot. So
exactly. And I was actually going to turn this thing into a triple monitor stand. Like my
I thought about doing the same with mine, wrapping triples around and put them stationary. I thought about the same thing. So
exactly. But what I started to run into is like my computer's here. It drives my main PC. It drives that. It becomes an issue of like compatibility. And I was like, you know what? I'm a VR guy. It's that, again, the immersion, put on it and I'm in the freaking car. Like I still can't get over looking at and seeing a fire extinguisher. It's like,
and what's funny too, like I tell people, like my dad thought it was really cool. And I said, step out of the rig. He steps out of the rig and you're looking at the car. I'm like, put your head through the side of the car. And I think the Corvette's one of them. They actually render the inside of the car. So if you put your head through the car, you can see everything.
Exactly. it's so I'm still waiting for the next gen. I mean, I have a Pimax AKX. It's great when it works. I generally use a valve index most of the time, and you can definitely get blurry and whatnot. But again, my thing isn't like I'm getting in there to drive to win. I'm getting in there to be immersed and like
it's the experience. It's more
exactly.
I'm more about the experience than I am anything else. It's like I said, the iRacing. I respect those guys. Some of those guys are amazingly fast. I'm more about building quality rigs, building the community, teaching people. That's me. And I'll be honest. I've watched guys that are static rig racers that are faster than us motion rig racers, and I almost feel like there should be two separate groups because I think that the guys that are stationary, they might be a little faster because they're not experiencing the actual motion where it impacts, I don't call it a handicap, but you're getting tossed around the rig, where you can slip with your hands. Like it's a little different. So
no, I 100% agree. I mean, I'll say it, but I always look at people in static rigs are cheating. So
I hate to say it, but I think you're right.
I can't handle it where they're just standing there and they're just driving. I'm like, where's at least the bump? At least get a 3DOF rig with like the corners so you can feel the bumps or something like that. Like how is this?
Right.
But exactly. Each to their own. You know, even in the sport I used to do, people are all like about winning at no cost, and it's like, okay, that's fine, but I'm more about the experience. So
I mean, you look at guys like Jimmy Bodent, the big YouTuber, like he still runs in a static rig, and I'm like, dude, you got a million subscribers. I'm like, how are you not in motion?
Well, even Boosted Media put out a recent video where he kind of admitted, right, like the truth about his rig, where it's really set up for content. Right. It might not be as immersive if you think like when you're actually there.
It definitely set up I could tell. I could have told you that. You can tell by looking at it. He's there to engage, not to compete. So.
But I'm always like, is whatever helps this community grow, sim racing, or the motion.
His story is great. There's a YouTube channel. I don't know if it's his, but somebody did a documentary on Jimmy. They interviewed him and went over how he started and where he is today, and how it's rewarded him with a really cool car collection based on sim racing. And I'm like, it's awesome.
You got to go race for real. And I mean, it's similar to me. It's like, that the opportunities I've had with this platform. I got into the open VR motion compensation, worked with Deshato, who does the compensation. So I get to know them. And that's the thing. Like I always say, it's like, you know, get in there, volunteer, help people out, and you'll be amazed at like what can come back. And it's the same
Oh,
thing with this
absolutely. That's kind of why I
community,
started
right?
this, doing this video series. I
Yeah,
mean, this would be fun. I want to engage guys like yourself that have given so much to the community and kind of put a name to the face. Like you said, a lot of your videos, there's no face there. You know, it's like
exactly.
it's
It's
pretty
just,
cool.
yeah,
So
it's not about it. It's just like,
yeah,
here's my tuning, here's the motion, you can
sure,
see it, can make it. Cause that was another thing. Like when I was thinking about all this stuff, it's like, it was hard to find videos,
sure.
right?
Oh,
Or
totally.
you'll get a video where it's like the motion platform's kind of moving, but it's a big screen of the car driving. I'm like, I want to see the platform. I
Right,
want to see
right.
how it works in this environment. What's the difference between the motion of an MX-5 and, you know, and a Ferrari 488? Well, like what are the
Exactly.
difference? How? And so that's honestly why it's there. You know, more videos are coming. It's all configured for Microsoft Flight Simulator right now, so I'll be
Yeah,
focusing on that. But that's why I love this hobby. You
that's
know, it's just,
awesome.
there's
That's
always
awesome.
something to do and always something to
Yeah.
create. So
Well, Jeff, I can't
I'll
thank
be
you
around
enough
for a
for
while.
coming on for an
Oh
interview,
yeah,
man. Definitely a ton of fun, and I can see us
no, it was
doing more of
definitely
these in
fun.
the future. So I got to ask.
It's,
I didn't ask Victor, but so who do you think my next victim should be? Who should, because you know the community pretty well, like I do. So who should we pick on? I'm trying to get Chris Murray on, and you know, or Craig Hyde. He'd be a good one because those guys are real good custom builders. But who else out there?
oh,
Pick a name. Let's see who we recruit.
I know I'm gonna totally destroy his name, but I think it's Stigacerton.
Oh yeah. He's from Texas. Yes. I
No,
know exactly.
no. He's the guy. He lives in outside. He's the one that built the put his P3 onto actuators, and he built his own steering wheel. He's one of the
Yes.
first guys that put triples
He put triples I.
on his
Yep.
P3. It's
Yeah,
Stigerson's.
I
I
can't
can't.
pronounce his full name, but he goes by
You know,
Stig. Yeah,
I would
STIG. I'm friends with him
love.
on Facebook. All right. Okay.
Yeah,
All
I would
right.
love to see an interview just because he embodies what I consider like the builders, right?
Yes, I
The
agree.
true, the people that are
Fabricator.
like, exactly, the innovators that are like, how do we do this? How do I make something, that aren't afraid to like try actuators with the DOF platform,
Once
aren't
again,
afraid to build a full, it's those are the people that inspire
you know what I
me.
need to do? I need to set up a studio. I'm actually at my home. I'm out in my office right now, but when I get home, I should set up a studio and have like my Sawzall and like maybe a welder hanging up on the wall, because that would embodies like a real builder, like of what we do. And say, you know,
Totally.
so,
No, but
yeah.
this has been a lot of fun. And that's what I would say to anyone that watches it, that has questions, you know, ping me on Discord, ping me on Facebook.
Sure. Yep.
I love, as you hear and how long we've gone for, I will talk forever about this
Yeah,
stuff because
yeah.
I'm
I mean,
passionate
leave a
about it.
comment below. I mean, Jeff's easy to get in touch with. He's in both groups, you know, active
Mhm.
every day. You know, it's sorry for the addiction, and I feel partially responsible for it. So
That's what we're here to do. We're here to, what is the classic line? We're here to spend your money. So
I think I was the one that coined that phrase. I think
exactly.
actually when I welcome new people, I ask for a credit card number. Let's make this easy on you. We'll just get the pucks on the water right
Exactly.
now.
Because once you get hooked, there's just nothing else.
It
That's what I
is.
love it. So again,
Yeah.
it's just thank you to you for like putting the communities together. Thanks to everyone that's a part of it. Thanks to everyone that provides feedback. You know, and that's what it's all about. It's just about having fun and just doing what we do. So
It
yeah,
is. It
it's
is. And the
great.
summer months is tough with the longer days. Like, you know, but in the winter months, I'm all about sim racing. When it's dark out at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I can sim race all
Oh yeah.
night.
Oh yeah. I'll be, after this call, I need to go out in my truck and
Yeah.
do the fuel filter and do all the other stuff. So I have my real world stuff, and then I get back to this
I
when I
hear
can.
you.
So
Cool. Well,
right on.
Jeff, I appreciate
Cool.
it. I'm going to try to get this video on the upload. It's probably going to take about 3.5 days to upload. It's only about a 2 hour long video, but that's okay.
Right on, man.
I think I'm not even going to edit it. I think it was all great content. I'm just going to send it
Sweet.
right up. So yeah.
Right on. Well, I appreciate it. Yeah, no.
All
Yeah,
right.
I'll talk to you again soon.
Cool. Jeff, I appreciate it.
Right.
Have a great night. See you,
You
bud.
too. Take care. Bye bye.